Right now, you'll see. Right now, you'll see um, that students are working on telling time or thinking about shapes, and the teacher is recording observations, and they're counting how many days they've been in school. They're looking at number lines. So, a variety of different activities that again encourage children to make predictions and share their observations. And problems and investigations is our whole group lesson. Often the teacher poses a problem, and then the children have some time to think about how they might solve it. They might turn to another student and share their ideas. And then the class comes back together to share their work and have conversations about the most efficient way or the most clever way to solve a problem. Workplaces are probably your children's favorite time because those are the games that are built into the curriculum to practice fluency standards and just have fun. So there's card games and there's spinner games and there's dice games, much like the kinds of games I played as a child, where I can encourage children to work on their number facts, and also, I can differentiate instruction because workplaces are played in small groups. And so the teachers then can monitor the play. So it wouldn't surprise you that your children are very visual. They've had access to a lot of different platforms that activate the brain, the hemispheres in the brains differently than even what our experience was as children. So our children really enjoy a variety of classroom manipulatives and models. So first we might have three-dimensional counting manipulatives, and we might even use fingers. And then they'll move towards representations like the 5 frame here in kindergarten or a 10 frame, for example. And then eventually we'll introduce the symbolic, the numbers, so that they can make sense of that visual representation with the symbols, with the abstract. So you'll see a variety of materials in the games and also in the classroom practice. And maybe there's even been some homework that's been sent home where you've seen some of these models and materials. So, Math Learning Center, the nonprofit I spoke about earlier, has created a variety of math apps for our families. And these are free, they don't require a username or password, and you can access them for an iPad or a Chromebook or a computer, even on your phone sometimes. So I'm going to go to this page, mathlearningcenter.org/apps. And also, our host is going to put a link in chat for the Math Learning Center apps.
Mhm.
So I'm going to give you just a minute to open up a new folder, a new tab. Stay in our Zoom meeting, but feel free to access a new tab for the apps. So what you'll notice on the app
There you
page,
go, Pia. There
thank
it
you
is.
so
You're
much.
welcome.
I want to give everybody just a minute to get to this page so that you can access what we're going to share. So you can see here on the apps page that a lot of the models and materials that the teacher is using in the classroom with children are also available digitally. So, for example, I'll explore a few of these apps with you now, and you can either play around with them now or a little bit later, maybe you have a child at home that would enjoy these experiences as well. So I can go to the geo board, and the geo board is a model that we use to build different shapes. So the children might be building triangles or maybe trapezoids. They might be building squares and rectangles. They might also be thinking about fractions on a geo board. So they can partition this geo board into a half, and then maybe use a different color band to show 1/4. And then again, a different color band to show 1/8. And I'm just stretching those bands with my mouse pad. If you're using an iPad or a Chromebook, a lot of children use a mouse sometimes, or just their fingers. And then finally, the half of a eighth, I can create a another example of a 16th. So again, I have one of 16 parts on the geoboard. I have 1/8 of the geoboard, and this would be 1/4, and this would be 1/2. And so one of the things I love about using a model to show these relationships is that children can build an example. And again, that mental image that helps them remember those partitions. For example, if this was a brownie, you might consider, what size piece would you like? The other thing I like about many of these apps is you also have an opportunity to extend the learning by encouraging students who are very comfortable with the small geoboard to work with a larger one. We also have a circle geoboard, which again, thinking about area and fractions and relationships, is an interesting math problem. The circle geoboard will also partition into sections, and I can also add numbers. So in fifth and sixth grade, for example, when the students are thinking about ordered pairs, if they're thinking about, do you remember the game Battleship, where you would talk about ordered pairs? So this would be 3/6, and this would be 3/3, and this would be 6/7, right, in ordered pairs. And we can play around with that example, that concept on a geoboard. I hear from parents that often that they would have really enjoyed learning math this way, and I agree. So that's the geoboard. We also have one for a math clock. And I want to share with you the money value pieces, because I know many of our fourth and fifth graders are connecting fractions with decimals. So understanding that relationship. So one of the things that you'll love about the money value pieces is that they are proportional. So I'll give you just a minute to look at the image and think about something that you notice. So right now, our second graders are collecting 2/4 every day for the month of March, and then they're adding up the money. And when they see the 2/4 over the top of the dollar bill, they can see that 2/4 would be half of a dollar, or 50 cents, right? And if I was talking about 3/4, I would be talking about 75 out of 100, or 75 cents. The app also allows you to go back and forth between pictures of money and then the proportional pieces. So I love the app because, again, it's proportional. So the dime is actually 1/10 of the dollar. And the nickel, which in real money is larger than the dime, that doesn't make sense to children. But here, the nickel is half of the dime. And the nickel would be 5 times, right, what I need to trade for a quarter. So if your child comes home and they have any problems with money, I would encourage you to use the money value pieces to help do some problem solving. See if that might help, because a lot of times knowing the names of the coins and the values can be very confusing for some of our children. All right, I want to show you just 2 more apps. One is the number pieces, which resemble place value pieces. Maybe you had these in school. So you might remember the base 10 pieces. And this app will allow you to change the color of the pieces. So the hundreds are red, the tens are green, and the ones would be just one, yellow. So I can take my hundreds and drag my tens and add some ones. And here's the funny thing about working with your own children with these apps. I have 3 grandchildren and they have taught me things that the app can do. So it's exploring and inquiry at the beginning, and they will show you stuff. But I love the idea of being able to see the quantity and again to see that relationship. Mathematically, it helps all students understand these ideas. And so, for example, in second grade, we're working on expanded notation. So I could say 100 plus 2 tens plus 20 plus 4 more. And then the children could see that that relationship would build the number 124. I was in a second grade class today, and maybe this is something your own child does, but they wrote 100 and then 24. So it was a good opportunity for us to talk about how expanded notation, what our conventions are when we're reading and writing numbers, right? So maybe that's an activity that you would enjoy doing with your child at home. All right, how about one more app? And that's the number rack. This model is used in kindergarten and first grade, second, and a little bit in third grade, but I like it for multiplication also. So maybe you're thinking about supporting your child at home with multiplication. So we're going to go to the mathlearningcenter.org/apps. Maybe put that link back in chat so anybody that's joined us just now can access the app page. And we'll go to the number rack app. And I want you to think about some things that you notice about the beads. In kindergarten, when we first start, we might say, show me 3. How many more to make 5? And the children can see those smaller groups of 3 and 2 and add them together. I might say, I have 1. How many more do I need to make 5? And again, the children can see the small size of the group and put that together. By now in kindergarten, we're talking about making 10. So I might say, I have 7 and I want to make 10. How many do I need? And then the child can say 7 and 3 would make 10. But again, we want to make sure that the children are using those groups of 5 and 2 and not counting by ones. When my granddaughter was in second grade, she was learning her addition facts, and maybe some of your children are as well. So when I would talk about what is 7 plus 8, Caitlin would add 5 and 5 to make 10, and 2 and 3 to make 5. And then she would add 10 because she knew the red ones were 10. And then she would add the white beads, and 10 and 5 were a fact that she knew. The beautiful thing about using a physical number rack and then moving to the app is that we can be very efficient. We can push 7 beads in one push instead of having to count by ones. And we can push 8 beads because I know it's 2 less than 10. And then we can see this relationship between the red and the white beads. So children are working on strategies instead of just memorizing and having to repeat that memorization the next year and the next year. They're creating a mental image of what the 7 plus 8 look like. And then they can retrieve it from their visual organization. So I want to show you, I mentioned earlier something about multiplication, and I love this app for that purpose. So this app will actually allow you to add rows. So I was in a third grade classroom helping some children with multiplication facts. And the fact that they were stuck on was 4 times 7. So quickly, we built 4 rows of 7. And I asked the children how they knew I had 7. And they said, well, 5 and 2 would make 7. Okay. So we built 4. And then I asked them what they noticed. Maybe you noticed these too. But they started counting by 5s. 5, 10, 15, and 20. Very confident. 5, 10, 15, 20. I said, are we done? And they said, no, you got to count the white ones. And I said, okay. So then they counted by 2s, and they know counting by 2 sequences. So they said 2, 4, 6, and 8. And this young man said, it's that easy? And I loved that enthusiasm. And I said, it is if you're not counting by ones, right? If you're trying to keep track of 7s on your fingers, you're going to lose track on, do you have 3 groups? Do you have 4? Did you miscount? So we want, again, students to think about grouping strategies, to think about multiplication. So this app will allow you to do up to 10 rows of 10, which would be all the multiplication facts that our children are expected to have strategies for. But again, taking apart 7, which for me was very hard as a child, 7s and 8s were difficult. But I love that they can build it out as 5 and 2, and then it's very accessible.
Yeah, if I may interrupt you, I have a parent that asked through the chat if you have any recommendations on apps for middle school or high school for math.
Oh, many of the middle school and high school are using our apps for more advanced work. So, for example, the Numberline app will actually do fractions and decimals. And then also the GeoBoard app you can use for coordinate grid graphing and fraction bars when you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions. You can use that app. And then the money value pieces for fraction and decimal work. if I'm adding decimals or multiplying with decimals. So our apps are not grade specific. It really depends on the teacher and what they're teaching. But there are some wonderful suggestions here at the top of the page for app activities. So up here where it says app activities, I can select a grade level, and there are some suggestions for some activities that I might do with my students, my children at home. So, for example, you see some examples here for grades 1 and 2. I can do the camping choices and thinking about what tent size is big enough for 4 people. I love that. I love that idea of thinking about how big should my camp tent be, right? Because a lot of times they're thinking this will be really tight. You can also take advantage of some of the situations that have already been set up on one of our apps. Let me give you an example. So, a geo board here is suggested as one of the apps for the tent. So, I can go here to where it says launch and watch what happens to my view. Okay, so it sets up the problem for me. And now I can think about, okay, well, this is Corey's spot. And maybe that's going to be big enough, but maybe Corey needs a little bit more length because Corey has long legs. And now that's one person, but now I need to build another spot for another friend. And then again, they can build it out as they're thinking about the area. How much space would be good? And then we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, the length here. So this would be a 4 by, and I think by the time we got done with all the friends, it would be a 4 by 8. And then maybe your students, your children are thinking about area. So this space has an area of 8. And this would be another group of 8. So maybe your children think about that as a double. 8 plus 8 would be 16. And then I know that this would be another group of 16. And 16 plus 16 would be 32. So they can use a combination of doubles facts and place value to think about tens and ones and adding it up together to figure out the square units that they would need for a tent. I've probably underestimated the size of a tent that you would want to be in. I think most of the tents I've seen in the store are like 8 foot by 8 foot or 8 by 10, right? They're bigger than that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
It,
yes,
may I ask a few more questions as parents are asking?
sure.
Okay, one of our parents has a third grader.
Mhm,
What would be the best focus as far as the app support that they should focus on
mhm.
for third grade?
That's a great question. So, if I were working on multiplication facts, I would probably love the number rack, right? That we modeled with the 5 and the 2 for groups of 7. So I would probably use that for multiplication. If I was working with a student on addition and subtraction with hundreds, tens, and ones, I would probably want to use the number pieces because that would help with place value.
Great.
Does that help?
Yes, I'm letting them hear that answer
Okay,
and that
great.
they on the Spanish channel. Yes.
Yes,
And
great.
also, how long should students be on these apps? What would you recommend? Or is there a time limit that is, that they should not be passing?
Well, maybe one of the things that you've noticed about these apps is that there are no distractions. They're very clean. There's no advertising, there's no shooting. So I'm not sure what your limits are for video games, But I love the apps because they allow children to construct meaning around the math topics. And I feel that that has a stronger value than like a game where they're getting points and again shooting and getting, just that the stimulus from a game like that. This is very um, mild in comparison with some of the other things that are available online. So I would say if they're working on a problem at home and they could use the support of some of the visual models, I would want them to have that available to them while they worked out their problems. And so you might even ask them which of the apps they're comfortable with, which ones they've been using in class, and then offer them a choice. I often feel like when children have a choice, they're a little bit more invested. I,
Great.
I think we all did the best we could over Zoom the past 18 months. And now it's so lovely to be in person and be able to work with children. But I'll also say that children are better at the apps than I am. So you can also find some great resources here for families. And if you'll, I'm on the app page still, but up here where it says for families, you'll notice that there's a little box that says Bridges Family Support. So I can go to this tab here and find some great resources by grade. So, for example, if I have a second grade child, I can click on the two and it'll give me an idea of the concepts that my second grader is learning. And then there's a welcome letter in English and also in Spanish that will give me sort of an overview of what my child is working on. And chances are, if you have a second grader, you might also have a fourth grader. So it might be helpful to have that same information just to kind of give you an idea of the concepts and skills that are being introduced and developed. So we also have um, a video and also some additional work with the National PTA, a parent teacher organization that has some suggestions about helping your child, like what questions to ask to get them to share their thinking. So, some really great resources here for our families. We also have just a short video, about 9 minutes in length, what does Bridges math look like in the classroom and how do students learn concepts and strategies. So from the same page of Bridges Family Support, you'll see a short video clip that also shares some information about the curriculum materials that teachers are using. All right, so now I'm going to go back to families where it says home learning. And if you would put the link in chat for math at home, that would be great. So there's a direct link. So 2 years ago, when the pandemic hit, one of the things we wanted families to have access to were interesting activities that they could do with their children at home that wouldn't involve um, just packets of worksheets. And so we have for every grade level, for example, if I have a fifth grader, I can click on fifth grade. And what I like about this is it's aligned to the units of study in Bridges. So, for example, many of the teachers in fifth grade would be at unit 4 right now. So I can go to set 4, which is multiplying and dividing whole numbers and decimals. And these activities from Math at Home are connected to the lessons that the teachers are using in workplaces and Number Corner and their whole group session. But they're interesting mathematics. They're great questions like, would you rather? or which one doesn't belong. And so you can have some nice conversations with families, and there are also some direct links to some games. So, for example, there's a game with two-digit multiplication, and then there's another one where I'm multiplying two factors and I'm trying to get four in a row, like a bingo um, board game. And again, you don't need a username or a password, you don't need registration. It's all free and available for you and your family. So again, from the math at home, so I'm going to go back to the math at home page. I'm going to back arrow so you can see how I got here. It'll allow me to choose the best grade. And I want to mention you might have a child that has some learning loss. Maybe they were out of school, or maybe there's another condition that's gotten in the way, and they need something that's a little bit more independent, that might be a little bit easier. So I might have a fifth grader that would be more independent and comfortable working with third grade. And so again, they can access any of the grade level materials and sort of get a ramp up, get comfortable with third grade multiplication, then added the double digit in fourth grade and fifth grade as well. So you have access to all the grade levels that you might be interested in exploring. And again, it's linked to the Bridges materials that are being taught in the classroom. And I love that, because often what happens is there's a disconnect between the resources that families have access to and the resources we have access to. So lots of great opportunities. And I want to just show a few examples. We have an app called the Pattern Block Shapes, and you can see it. But what Wallace did at age 6, building like a little human with a house, and what Cora was able to do at age 8.5 with rotational symmetry. And I mean, it's beautiful art, right? And then if I were doing fractions with pattern blocks and trying to sort out the area where the hexagon was worth 1, so what is the value of that small green triangle? And the kids had to figure out the area of my little person, my shape. So again, the apps have a great range that really serve us well with our students, with our children. So again, the family support is on the website. You can access mathlearningcenter.org, and from there you can access the apps, the math at home activities, and again, support your families at home. So things you can do: play card games, board games, and digital games sometimes too, for practice. I know sometimes families can be a little competitive. Mine was as well. But what I like is choose games that are based on decks of cards, game boards, and spinners. And I'll tell you why. I was the third child in my family. I had an older brother and an older sister, and they were much faster. And if the game was based on speed, I could never win. So, what I liked is that I could spin, and sometimes I would get lucky and win. Or I could grab a card, and it was just the card I needed to win. Or I could roll the dice, and that's just what I needed to win the game. So, we want to make sure that we keep the children who need the practice engaged in the play by making sure that it's based more on probability than speed and skill. So just to think about, right? And while we're playing, let's have conversations about, how'd you figure that out? Does that always work? Can you help me figure out my score? And then there's always some game variations. So maybe we use a wild card, or maybe today we use the 4 through 9 dice instead of the 1 through 6 dice. Did you ever make up your own games as a child? We did. And then I hope you'll use the math at home and the apps to help support that visual representation that your children use to create those mental images so that they have a deeper understanding of number sense. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time just opening it up for general questions, something that you're wondering about, or something maybe I mentioned that you'd like me to go back to.
I have a question from one of our parents through the chat. How would you say that they should be doing the homework that they get assigned and these apps? Should they use them together?
I love that idea of using them together because a lot of times the teachers don't have enough materials to send them all home in the physical. And so while the child is working on, for example, money, I might pull up the money app and have them show me how that would all work to solve some of the problems. Or maybe base 10 pieces would help with understanding hundreds and tens and ones. Or maybe if we built fractions using a geo board or the fraction app, that would help children understand their homework. So again, I think we could use it side by side instead of exclusively.
And feel free if you'd like to ask a question, you can either put your hand up and I can unmute you from my end, or you should be able to unmute yourself, however you'd like, but we'd love to hear your questions. Let's see, at the moment, I don't see anybody's hand up. Guess we answered all your questions. Yeah,
I
did.
do,
Sorry,
I
we have a
do
lot of
want,
people.
we do, which is wonderful. I know before the pandemic, I had a chance to do family math nights with many campuses, many schools had me come, and we had a chance to share some of this information about how things might be same or different than when we were growing up. And then families played workplace games. And of course, with the pandemic, we need to be thoughtful about social distancing. But I've talked to several principals that want to host a family math night next year so that we can get together and celebrate the learning that children are doing in the classroom.
Thank you, Pia. I don't see any questions at the moment. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add before we go.
Well, I would show you one more app if we have a little bit of time.
We definitely have time. We're
That be okay?
class is scheduled till 6:30, so
Okay, all right.
uh,
Okay. So another app that we could explore is called Number Frames. And from the number frames, I can do a variety of different concepts that could be very helpful for a variety of grade levels. So I open up the page and I can choose the frame. If I'm working with a kindergartner, I might choose the 5 frame and I can build some red dots and some blue dots. And then we can talk about how many make 5. And we can write equations. And I didn't show you this, but this is awfully fun. Kids love to play hide and seek. So I might make a screen down here. You saw that little shade. I can pull it down and I can hide some. So I can say I have one red dot and the rest are blue. How many do you think are blue? And then if you see this little eyeball here, ooh, I can give you a quick peek. So how many blue did you see? So our youngest learners love to hide and seek. I can also do the same activity with 10 frames and 20 frames. And I can use the 100 frame again for multiplication. So maybe I have some third grade families that were wondering how. I mean, if you explore the number rack for a while and the kids need a little break, think about using the number frame app. Let me model some exploring with the drawing tool. So when I talk to even fifth graders sometimes, and I say, what facts are difficult for you? Often they choose the sevens and the eights. So I can use an array, an area model, to build out 7 times 8. So my vertical dimension that shows those rows is 7, and the horizontal dimension is 8, and that shows the columns. There's 8 columns. Now I want you to just for a minute think about the partial products, the areas that are represented in this array. Here's what the children tell me. Well, I know that that is 25. And we might even count 5, 10, 15, 20 to make sure. But sometimes they'll say, this is like the quarter on the dollar. So I know it's 25, which is a great connection. And then we might talk about 2 rows of 5. And again, that's a fact that most children know. 2 times 5, double 5, just like their fingers. And here we might count by fives to come up with a partial product of 15. And then this is a double, 2 by 3. Children know that that's a 6. So now we might come back together, and instead of counting by ones, we're thinking in groups, bigger groups, and maybe they're going to say, well, I know 25 and 15 is 40. So that's 40, right? And then I had another 10 here. So 40 plus 10 would be 50, and that's easy, right? And then I would add the 6. So 50 plus 6 is 56. And I can think about it in groups, in bigger chunks, right? Much like in reading, the more fluent you are, the bigger chunks of words you know. And same in math, right? We want students to have some computational strategies that they can use that are efficient. So when students start counting by ones, I might nudge them and say, I bet you know 2 groups of 5. Oh, right, that's 10. And we can talk about grouping structures instead of unitary counting. But I want to share something with you that a student shared with me for this particular fact. I'm going to erase all this work that we did with 4 partial products, and I'll tell you what this child did. This child said, before I even had a chance to outline the edges, he said 56. And I said, Marco, how did you do that so fast? And he said, well, I just moved these 10 down here, and I know half of 100 is 50, and then you had 6 here, so I just know it's 56. I never thought of it that way because I didn't grow up this way. And here's this 4th grader explaining the strategy just beautifully to the rest of the group. And do you know the whole group, if they had a fact like 7 times 8 on their page, they would always kind of look up and look at Marco sometimes too and go 50 and then 6, 56. And they remembered the model, and that half of 100 made it so explicit for them. And I thought, wow, where was I when I was growing up? It would have been nice to have a visual representation to help with the symbolic. That's where it comes from, right? Yeah. All right. Any additional questions while I've been showing the app?
I love the app, Pia.
I love that too, right? Like,
Yeah, it's really neat. And you're right, we don't think that way. It's yeah. I'm actually like watching and thinking, my goodness, yeah.
Right?
I don't
Yeah,
see any
yeah.
questions. I don't see any hands up. So
I don't have a question. I have a suggestion.
sure.
The suggestion is these apps are really fun, and I'm gonna talking about myself. Maybe I'm always school and math, but I hope you guys do more of these Zooms for parents so we can more, because math these days way beyond.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're definitely bringing in an expert. Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
This one is got especially for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I agree. I think the way we were taught math, there were children that were accelerated. We thought they had a math brain. And there were some people that thought they didn't have a math brain. And now, what we want to say to our children is everyone can do this kind of math. But maybe you think in pictures, and maybe you think in numbers, and different people think in different ways. And we need to celebrate that diversity instead of thinking there's only one way. So, I want to create an environment in the classroom that's accessible for everybody so they all feel successful and not just the children who are quick, because math isn't always fast. The deeper thinking comes from exploring big ideas.
We have Miss
Thank you.
in the chat, Miss Rosalba, that wants to thank us for the class today, for teaching new strategies on how students can have fun while learning math, and just how to work with our kids during the math process. So thank you, Ms. Rosalba. Gracias a usted. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So I
Uh,
think the webinar is going to be recorded. And so if you have a friend that missed it, or maybe you joined later tonight, I hope you'll please share the information and then reach out to a variety of people. Your child's teacher is probably a great place to start. And if they need additional support, I'm happy to help.
Perfect. And yes, like Pia said, the recording will be up by tomorrow on our YouTube channel. And every Tuesday evening, 5:30 to 6:30, we have a different topic. So feel free to join us every week. We're going through the month of May. And so we'd love to have you here and hear how you're enjoying the classes, or what we could add or change, any of that. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Pia. I hope everyone has a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.